TeenSpeak, empowering today's youth. TeenSpeak explores the unique strategies and stories of amazing young people from around the globe who are pushing boundaries, overcoming adversity, and achieving greatness. The guests share their personal stories of success, resilience, and courage with an infectious dose of inspiration to help encourage our listeners to create the life they desire. Your hosts, Keith Senzer and Antoine Thompson, are youth empowerment and leadership coaches that have dedicated themselves to helping teens find their true north by educating, supporting, and inspiring them.
Hey there, welcome to another episode of TeenSpeak. I am Coach Keith in New York. I'm a youth empowerment, leadership, and executive function coach.
And I am Antoine Thompson, or Coach T, and I'm a youth personal growth and development coach. And today I am going to allow my co-host to tell us what we're going to be discussing today, a really important topic.
Yeah, so today we're going to talk a little bit about social media. Not so much about the content, but more about how it impacts our executive functioning, the distractions, how it's curated, and how the dopamine hits that we get through social media, right, impact teens and adults alike, right? Like when we talk about all these things, I think if you're an adult listening to this podcast, you're going to understand exactly what we're talking about, because what happens to your kids is happening to you. And just ways as a family to work around social media and smart ways to, have your kids have phones responsibly so they don't develop the bad habits. And maybe we could talk a little bit about some critical thinking. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think you made a great point too, as with parents kind of getting in the same boat with kids. And it's maybe an eye opener for those parents that are listening and go, hey, I understand what you're talking about, but I probably need to lead by example as well. And I think it'll be an opportunity for some of them to realize that, hey, I want my kids to be responsible, but I got to be responsible as well.
Yeah. And what the thing that brought up this topic for me, and what I was discussing with Antoine, is, we're in different states, obviously, right? So I don't know everything going on in North Carolina, but I know in New York, the governor of New York, Kathy Hochul, just passed a law that's starting this September that there'll be no cell phones in schools. You can't bring them to class with you, right? Have them in school, which of course is causing a frenzy for people for two reasons. It's causing a frenzy for parents because, and I mean, I'm sorry, I'm going to say this out loud. Maybe it's going to piss some people off. I don't really care. Parents trying to get doctor's notes. Anxiety, my kid's anxiety, need their phone. 90% of the time it's the parents' anxiety. Your kids don't need their phones in school. People have used the excuse, well, God forbid there's a school shooting. It's actually proven it's more dangerous to have your phone and be using it during a school shooting than it is not to. So there's a lot of studies behind this, but the truth is they don't need the phones in school. It's a distraction. I don't disagree necessarily with this law. However, I think it's being brought down too fast. And I think what's happening is there's no education behind it. You can't just turn around to parents and to kids and be like, okay, this is how it's going to be. Because the parent wants to understand, well, why, I do have some concerns. And the kids, they need to understand why you're telling them they can't have their phone. Just telling them they can't do anything. We all know how teens are, right? If you tell a kid you can't have it, they're going to want it more.
Right.
So, one of the things I've been doing a lot is I've been speaking a lot at schools. We just spoke, myself and my partner from one of my other businesses, at a conference for the superintendents on how to educate kids on this and help them understand. So we're hoping on this podcast I can share some of that, and Coach T's insight on this about how it's really important to understand why this is actually a decent idea if it's rolled out the right way. Sometimes in New York, we roll things out here very quickly without thinking them always through. So as I said, I don't disagree with the idea. I think I disagree with the way it was implemented, but I think over time it's something everybody will get used to. And I think it'll be good for teens and mental health in general. And I hope other states follow suit. So I'd love your perspective on that.
Yeah, well, I think it is it's circulating here in North Carolina as well. And I think you make a valid point too. It's just like anything else. And that you were just explaining that, Keith, that made me think about how I coach. And I'm going to use it as an analogy. When you first start teaching kids how to do something, you tell them how to do it, right? You tell them. And they become robots because they go, okay, I got to do this. I got to do this. But when I started explaining to them why we're doing certain things, then the walls come down, they start to understand it, and they appreciate it, they respect the reasoning behind it. And I think that's what you're talking about with the phone situation. Had New York gone about and say, hey, this is why we're doing this, for the safety of the kids, to get the kids more focused on their education so they're not distracted. And to your point, if you tell them that they can't have it, yeah, they're going to find ways. And the first thing I'm thinking, hey, they're going to either get a second phone or they're going to find a way to sneak those phones in there, regardless if they get, checked before they get to school. So I think it's really important. And the scary part is if it becomes a national issue. And to your point, I think it's going to be more of an uprising from parents than it would be from students, I really think. And to your point about the anxiety on the parent side more so than on the kids.
Yeah. And you need the buy-in, right? Because the truth is, if everybody buys in, now you're asking teachers to be enforcers, right? To enforce it. And it's important the students have the relationship with their teacher, right? Like they have that good relationship that they can trust them, if they become the enforcer, now I hate my teacher, and they're just trying to do and it's honestly, I don't think it's fair to put that on a teacher. I think if it's done the right way, there's buy-in. And again, maybe not necessarily the role of the state to do it, but I feel like they should be supporting educators on, hey, here's how to have these conversations with the students so they will buy in, which is what I want to talk about today. And, one of the first things I think you could start with is, as an executive functioning coach, I can tell you, like, there are kids right now. So executive functioning in general, right? It's a skill everybody needs. But unfortunately, it's the students with IEPs and 504s, kids with special needs and diagnosis that are getting a lot of the executive functioning skills. A lot of neurotypical students, they're not, because they don't teach it in school. A lot of schools don't teach it. I shouldn't say all. I don't want to make that a blanket statement. I'm working with a kid right now from Yale who bombed his freshman year, graduated with like 106 weighted average, like absolute genius, never had to pick up a book, never had to do anything. And he bombed his freshman year of college. And, when I started talking to him, I realized he has zero study skills, time management, nothing. He has zero executive functioning skills, and it's not his fault. Nobody ever showed him. He just always good. Oh, he's doing great. He doesn't need anything. Right. And now you put him in the real world in college where everything's different and there's no structure, and he was lost. Happy to say he's doing great now, but that's an example. And the other part of the executive function is, there's a lot of kids now that are being misdiagnosed. They're being, doctors are diagnosing them with ADHD or some, dyslexia, dysgraphia, and, but mostly ADHD. I should back up on that. Dyslexia and dysgraphia is a fairly, if you have it, you have it. But a lot of students are being diagnosed with ADHD because they're distracted. They can't focus. Their time management's out of control. They have time blindness. And the truth is, it's actually a lack of executive function skill. It has nothing to do with ADD or ADHD. So these kids are on medication that they don't need to be taking. So that's another whole issue right there that I'm seeing, and I've got kids that, it got to me on medication, and once they had the skills, they're like, I don't need this medicine. I'm like, well, I'm not a doctor. You can't talk to me. You got to talk to your parents and your doctor. But their doctor took them off of it, and they're functioning fine. So there's that whole side to it,
Yeah, I actually had a couple of kids that were misdiagnosed as well. I talked to a couple parents about it. This was a few years ago, and I think you make a valid point too. And I don't want to get to switch this to the medical industry, but part of it was some of the parents were saying, it's like, doctors just want the easy way out. This is a good way just to kind of move on and put these kids on medications and not really monitoring. And once they get them on them, because they feel like, okay, that's what they need, and they kind of move on. But I think the other part you're talking about why they're being misdiagnosed too is a big part of what we're talking about is distractions. And one of the biggest distractions is, electronics and I guess we should say social media as well. But it's true. And there's less focus on their executive functioning skills that would affect their academics. And there's more focus on or less critical thinking because, you're scrolling and you're just doing all of this communication on a digital device that requires no executive functioning and no true social skills because you're hiding behind screens and you're hiding behind typing words.
Yeah. And, the distraction piece is really, like, think about this is what I always try to say. Like, when I work with kids, I always tell them, take your phone, right? Like right now, mine's on silent, right? And it's upside down. I mean, I'm showing to you now, but it's upside down, so I don't see anything, right? But think about starting a car. You got to get in the car. You got to put the key in. You got to turn on the engine. You got to step on the gas. And it takes a few seconds to get to like 60, right? To cruising speed, whatever, right? The minute you stop, you have to put your foot on the gas again, right? You stop for a light. You got to put your foot. It's start, stop, start, stop, So when a kid's studying, and doing their work, it takes time for them to kind of get in their zone and be like, okay, I'm in my zone now. I'm focused. I'm on it. The minute they pick up that phone and look at a text, it's like you turn off the engine. And now you got to start the engine again. And then it's like you wonder why this homework should be taking me 20 minutes, but it took me 45 minutes, because every time you get distraction, your brain kind of not your brain it dumbs down, right? It goes
Yeah.
down. Like you start doing your work here at like level 1, and to get to level 10, the car's got to be cruising. Every time you get to level 10, you get a distraction. You go back to level 1. So it just takes so much longer to get it done. And then there's the whole, the fear missing out piece, which causes procrastination, right? Like, and oh my God, this thing's going on. I need to know what's going on. I need to deal with this right now. And you keep putting off the work. And before you know it, and here's the thing, time blindness is real. They don't realize what time is passing. And before you know it, now you've got stress and anxiety because things that you needed to get done in this particular time now are not getting done as quick as you want. Now it's starting to weigh on you. And what do you do when you feel anxious? You avoid. So now they push it off and they don't deal with it. I'll deal with it tomorrow. And then the anxiety just keeps coming. And there's so many negatives for distraction. Even with just, same thing with like just study skills, right? Like just being able to study for an exam. I don't care how smart you are. If you're in the middle looking at flashcards or reading your notes over, or doing whatever you're doing, and you get distracted, like you're gonna forget half the stuff you just studied every time that happens. I mean, there's science behind this. So the distraction piece and the impact that phones have on executive function is huge. And I mean, it causes procrastination. It causes time management issues. It causes
the fear of missing out,
longer to get things done. It just, there's so many negative impacts on the executive functioning of a person. And listen, executive function is not just time management. It's also emotional regulation, right? Like executive function is also emotional regulation is a big part of that. So every time you get triggered by something you see, whether it's excited or annoyed, that gives you an emotional response. And if you're excited, now you can't stop thinking about what you're excited about. And if you're triggered, you're upset about what you were triggered about. Now you can't focus on the things you were trying to do, right? So it impacts everything.
Yeah, it does. And I just thought of something. You may remember this. You remember Holly that we had on the show a while back? She was the girl that had she was nervous because she was having, I think, her wisdom teeth out, and she was worried that, remember that? Mm-hmm. Do you remember what she talked about when she was talking about her study habits? And that, I know we were going to be talking about some tips and things at the end, but that just made me think of, well, Holly talked about when she studied, she would give her phone to her father, and for 2 hours. And she said when she just started doing that, she didn't think about anything about, what she may be missing out on, or, just not being distracted. And she said her study habits got better because she didn't have the distraction of having her phone near her. And, she never asked her father for the phone because she knew she had made that decision to give up that phone. So now that's, to me, is one of those great examples. She was a high school junior at the time, so I think she's graduated by now. But that's just a perfect example of how you can take control of your study habits.
Yeah. By the way, like even parents listening right now, and anybody listening to this, I mean, adults do too, right? Think about yourself at work. You're working on a work project, or you're working on something that you need to do, right? Or you're a teacher grading papers, whatever you're doing, right? If you have that phone near you, like, I don't care how old you are, how experienced you are, those distractions impact you the same way they impact students. The difference is we've learned how to manage them a little better because we're adults and we have life experience, but it still impacts us, right? So there's that piece of it too. And, the cool thing, there's some great apps out there. I mean, like one of my favorite is called the Freedom app, where you can literally set times on when you are not allowed to go to certain apps, go online. Like it literally actually has, like, it'll have LinkedIn, it'll have Facebook, or you can put in whatever you want, but you can actually block out time. So when you go to try to go to that website, it redirects you back to what you were doing. And then if you want to change it, it's like a 3 or 4 step process. So somebody with ADHD or ADD, when they get to step 2 and realize they didn't fix it yet, they're going to be like, oh, forget it. I'll just finish what I'm doing, right? Like it purposely does that. Like it's designed that way. And by the way, that's just one app. There's so many apps out there to help. I mean, I could do a whole story on just, executive function apps that will help students and adults. But setting an app like a Freedom app on your computer, on your phone, where you have certain times that you want to focus and do what you need to do. It won't allow you to get on YouTube and do all that. And by the way, that's another issue, right? Teachers are using YouTube now to teach, which is great, except now they're going on YouTube.
Yeah,
And what do you think YouTube's doing? They're going on their account. They're going to look at what you sent them. But while they're doing that, it's sending them everything that they're interested in, right?
Yeah.
So now they get distracted. Like there's like a no-win here, why it requires discipline. And you can't learn discipline without somebody teaching you how to be disciplined, right? So that's why having these executive function skills taught in school are so important, because if you don't have them, it's very hard to beat the game. And it's a game, because these social media companies, all they're doing is vying for your attention, and they do whatever they can
to get it. Yeah. I mean, but you also bring up a good point too, about establishing those executive functioning skills to be disciplined and responsible. It begs to question, how do you do it with the middle school and high school kids who have been doing it for a while versus when you get to these young kids? Because, kids are getting phones younger and younger now. I mean, I have nephews, was 4 years old, just grasped my phone, never used my phone before, and just starts going through it. And I'm like, holy crap. I mean, how do you have to start really early, but unfortunately, and I'm just making a blanket statement, but I think it's probably pretty true. A lot of times parents give kids these electronic devices as a distraction to keep them busy. Well, the longer they do that, it becomes a part of their everyday routine, which ultimately makes it even harder when they get to middle school and high school to really break them of that habit. So I think your point is it would take a lot of structure and a lot of planning overall, going back to this whole thing of what's happening in New York with the no phones. Yeah, it's going to be like a culture shock for both parents and kids, and how they overcome that is going to be the telltale sign. Will the law hold? Will there be enough pushback to where it's like, okay, maybe we need to redefine how we do this, because it's really blown up in our faces kind of thing, because we've seen those kind of things happen. But I just think that there has to be a plan where we focus on the early part of a teaching responsible use for younger kids. We're talking elementary school and younger, versus what we do with the middle school, high school kids who've already gone through it for years and years, and getting them to be more responsible. But that leads to leading by example, as well, instead of just instituting guidelines and policies to kind of control how they use it.
Yeah, there's actually, in my particular town where I live in Plainview, and I'm sure it's not just here, because I know they're trying to spread it. There's a movement right now. Most of these kids are getting phones, and look, let's be honest, right? Socioeconomic communities where the money is there, these kids are getting phones in 5th and 6th grade. Obviously, it's not happening, in poor communities, but they still have access to it, right? It's just a little later, right? Or maybe they're getting flip phones because they're more affordable, which honestly is better for them. But the movement here is, if you're going to give your kid a phone in 5th or 6th grade, give them a flip phone. Because the truth is, the kids' pushback is always, but my sports team, they're always texting. That's how we stay in touch, or we're making plans. Well, you can do all that with a flip phone. A flip phone allows you to do everything you could do with a smartphone, except go on the internet. So you can still text, you can still stay in touch, you can still have group chats, right? Like, you can still do all that, So there's this big push now, in our neighborhood, that, like, if you're going to give your kid a phone, give them a flip phone. Let them get used to working with a flip phone, the texting. Let them deal with the emotional regulation around what texting looks like, what group texting looks like, what interaction and social cues look like, right? Like, get comfortable with all that. So now when they get to high school and they get to 9th grade, and you want to give them a smartphone, they've had a few years to really grow up, mature. Their brains had time to mature a little bit, right? And understand the usage and how emotional regulation works, right? Before they start getting into social media and now getting posted, and I hate to say it, but a lot of adults are like, they don't want to say no to their kids, which I get as a parent, but at one point, you have to decide what's better, what's worse. And like, I think we talked about this, and I know we're going to get into a little bit about ways of doing this, but you have to understand how these social media companies work, right? They curate the material that they want you to have. And these kids live off these dopamine hits, just like we do as adults, right? Like, listen, anytime somebody comments on the podcast, we want it, right? Oh, this is great. Somebody loved it, right? Like, we look for it too. But the problem with the dopamine hits is all of these social media companies, they're very, very, what's the word I'm looking for? They're very intentional about how they do it. So these dopamine hits that these kids get are on an intermittent basis. It's just like a drug addict or an alcoholic, right? It's all intermittent, right? It's like, when's the next hit coming? When can I have my next drink, right? Like they're constantly anticipating it as opposed to being steady. So, it's like, like Pavlov's dog, right? Like, after enough times you ring the bell, the dog, they know, like they're waiting for that next hit. So the intermittency of it is actually where the danger comes in, because they never know when it's coming. So they're constantly craving it. And then when it comes, they get it, they feel good, and then they're craving it again. And these companies know that, and this is what's led to a lot of we're not going to get into this, but like when I talk about critical thinking, what's on social media is really not somebody's real life, right? Somebody who posts all the stuff going on in their life on Instagram. It's wonderful. You want to share your good experiences. I think that's great, but that's not what that person's life is. That person has the same struggles everybody else has, right? They're just not sharing it, because who's really sharing that? I mean, yes, I've seen some posts where people share that, but for the most part, what's put out there is what they want you to see. It's not, and I'm not just about the social media companies, I'm talking about people, right? That post, teens that post, right? We post what we want you to see. So other kids are getting this sense of, well, I'm not good enough, or I don't have that. Well, no, you are. That's not real. That's not a real representation of what you're seeing. Maybe that particular incident is real in that person's life, but that isn't that person's life. It's just what they're putting out there in the moment. And again, goes back to emotional regulation. It's so important to teach this. And these social media companies, like, they're so irresponsible in the sense that, like, look, even if you go on like DraftKings, there's something on there that says like gambling is addictive. If you have a problem, call this, right? There's warnings on there letting you know, like, we do this, but like it could be dangerous.
Right.
There's nothing on social media.
Well, there's let me jump in. I just wanted to, because you make a great point. I just wanted to add, there's another aspect of it where they look for validation based on number of followers they have. You ever hear people talk about, if you see posts and they're saying that whether somebody's a small influencer, medium size, or large, and they talk about how many followers they have. To your point, that's not real. That's just people clicking a button to follow you, not really knowing. But young people use that as validation that they're important, when in reality they're more important than the likes on a particular platform.
Yeah, I don't know if you ever listen to Gary Vaynerchuk.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So, I mean, either you love him or you hate him, because he's definitely right out there. But one of the things he says all the time, and I agree with him, he's like, I don't give a crap about likes. He goes, you can give me 1,000 likes, 10,000 likes, 1,000,000 likes. It's the quality of the likes. He's like, if 10,000 people like a post, but 2 of them want to interact with me because they actually really resonated with them, and I can get to those 2 people, I don't care if I only have 2 likes. If the 2 people that liked it got something out of it, he goes, that's what's important. It's not the amount of likes, it's the quality. And he's right. Like you said, you're 100% right. Like, they seek validation from this. And that's the other thing. Like, nothing is worse than living our lives expecting external validation. We have to validate from within. And, we've talked about this on the podcast before about wearing a mask, right? It is so emotionally draining to wear that mask to fit in so we can feel validated, right? And what ends up happening is eventually, as we grow up, the mask comes off, and then people realize, oh, you're not who I thought you were. And then that relationship is not what it used to be. And now you're dealing with that emotional turmoil around that, right? But, if you validate from within and realize you don't need other people's validation, it's such a stronger place to operate from. And I know it's easier said than done, but this is why we need to be teaching social emotional learning in schools too, right? Like, we need to teach kids to self-validate and understand, and, we were talking earlier, right? Like, just also for kids to understand, hey, it's okay to not agree.
Yeah.
It's okay to not agree. It doesn't have to ruin a relationship. You can have different opinions on something. Well, then just don't discuss that amongst each other. You're entitled to have your separate opinions, have your opinion, but go about your life, living your life. This person is in your life for a reason. They're important to you. Don't talk about the things that are going to divide you. It's okay. Like, you're not going to agree on everything, right?
Yeah.
But look, how many married households the husband and wife have different political views. Like you're gonna get divorced because you don't talk politics if you don't agree with things. It's still your wife, it's still your husband, right? Like so, but I'm not talking about even politics, just like relationships, right? Somebody did something that wronged you. Okay, well, that's between you and that person. You don't need to drag everybody else into it. And everybody else doesn't need to get into it. Learn. Social media makes it so hard for these kids to have critical thinking skills because they get triggered by everything they see. And the companies put out there what they want you to see. And it's curated that way, or kids are creating what they want you to see and how they want you to see it. And, unfortunately, if you can't learn to look at something and just be like, I need to research this a little. I need to check into this, whether it's a social media post, a friend's post, whatever the case may be. If we just go by everything we see, we lose complete ability to critically think, and we just go with what we see. We believe it to be truth. And it's not, like you said before, especially the stuff that's posted up there that's not reality. It's just the reality in the moment. It gives off the impression that this is all the time. And that's a very dangerous place to be.
Well, I want to give a couple examples because you're hitting the nail on the head when we talk about the facade of reality versus, the real world. There's several. TikTok is nothing but a reality show for some people because you're right. You've seen them, right?
Yep.
But there are a lot of in the recent months. There's been a lot of big influencers that have been quote unquote exposed, talking about what you're talking about with the mask coming off. Either it be not necessarily political, but just in general, some things that people figured out about them. Well, what happens is everybody's turned on those individuals. And these are adults we're talking about. So if kids can understand the impact of not being real and trying to portray this certain lifestyle online and realizing that there are some people that really know you and know that's not you. And they always say when you tell one lie, you got to remember the next lie. And those lies, that list of lies gets longer and longer and you can't tie them all together. So it's better to be who you are. Let people accept you for who you are. If they don't, they're not your tribe. Your tribe is out there. It's a matter of you finding them and not changing who you are to fit in. And so I just wanted to kind of throw that in because you're spot on and it just made me think of a few people. And I was actually shocked by a couple of them. Like I was bamboozled by some of it too, but at the same time, but you don't believe everything you see and don't believe everything you hear. Do your own research and figure out, okay, there's something not right about this. If there's something not right about it, it's not right.
Yeah. No, you're right. And listen, it's for adults too. I mean, we do the same thing. We're all social, like I didn't grow up with social media as a teen, right? Like I didn't have any of this. I didn't have this level of stress or anxiety. The amount of stress and anxiety that these teens have because how often they're triggered by what they see. We didn't have this growing up. Like honestly, I had a really good childhood, right? I didn't have I didn't have anxiety. I wasn't stressed out. I had ADHD. I struggled in school a little bit, but like I didn't have any of this, and watching what goes on. I mean, it's even the conversations I have with some of the kids that I work with, like when they tell me something like my heart, I'm like, oh my God, like you really feel that way? Like you don't need to feel that way. Like it's bad that you feel that way. Like, how can we not feel that way? Like, let's talk about that. Right.
Right.
It's really, really bad. And the triggers are there. The thing too is like all these things we're talking about, right? About like, I think every school needs to show teens that movie, The Social Network. Was it called? What's the Social Network? No, that was the Mark Zuckerberg movie. There's that movie that came out on Netflix that talked about, it was about an hour and a half and it talked about what was going on in social media and how the company, like they almost frame it like a little dark room with these guys behind it with beady eyes. And it would be a kid looking at their phone and then they would flash to them going, okay, send them this now. Right. Like it shows the manipulation. Right.
Right.
That movie should be shown in every school to every student in middle school. So they understand, like in fifth grade. So they really understand what's going on. And then, to bring this initiative forward, teaching these kids, look, here's why you don't need all the social media. Here's how it impacts your executive function. Here's how it's going to impact your ability to study, to focus, right? We're not saying don't have a phone. Start with this phone because you can still do these things. And as you get older, you'll get something a little more robust, right? But like right now, what do and having a conversation, letting the kids talk about it and be like, how's that going to benefit you? Tell me how having this will benefit you. Tell me how this works for you, right? Like engaging them in the conversation and teaching them the dangers and how this could hurt them and how can it impact them. If the teachers are able to teach that and the schools are able to teach that to the kids, they'll have a better understanding and be more accepting. And more importantly, how the school districts are teaching this to the parents through PTA, through SEPTA, whatever, so the parents can do it. I don't mean to jump ahead, but one thing that I think every parent should do, right? How many times, Antoine, do you walk in a restaurant and the entire
Families on their phone. Yeah.
Right? Like, why'd you bother going out to dinner?
Right. Stay home.
My kids are older. I have a 28-year-old and a 24-year-old, but my kids know when we're all together, if we're going for dinner, right? We're all home together. Like, there is no phone. Like, the phone goes in your pocket or it goes face down on the table. Like, turn it off. God forbid there's an emergency. There's somebody that might need to be calling. You have a sick parent or whatever. I get it, right? But for the most part, nothing annoys me more when I walk into a restaurant. I look around and everybody's on their phone.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what message are you sending? And I think contracts, like a parent-teen contract, is a family contract, right? Here's when we use the phone. At this time, everybody has to shut down and put their phone in this charging area in the house, right? Like have something that you all come up with together, adults, kids, all talk about it. Come up with a contract for the family about what it looks like using your cell phone, when you can, curfews for it, all that type of stuff, right? And all agree to it. But here's the thing. As mom or dad or guardian, if you're not going to live by the contract, you can never expect your kids to.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think the only thing I'll add to that, we mentioned earlier, is when you're making that contract, don't let it be the parents say, this is how it's going to be, because the kids are never going to go along with it. They have to be a part of the process, because if there are questions, that means there's a conversation to be had, and it shows respect on both sides. Hey, mom, dad wants me to be more responsible. Well, I want to be responsible. Well, can I do this? And like, okay, we'll make some concessions here. And I think it has to be a collective. It made me think about when you're talking about the restaurant thing. This was years ago when I guess social media really started kind of going. There was a Division I college football coach that went to a restaurant, and he walked in with his wife and another couple, and they sat down. None of them had their phones. And they looked over, and there were two couples. And he said for the entire time they were there, all phones were never on the table at one time. And he started joking. It's like when people go to sleep, they wake up and they're like, oh. It's like wake up with a phone in their hand. I mean, before they even go to the bathroom, they got their phones in their hands. And it's just that the phones have just taken over every aspect of our society, and this is from kids and adults, and it's going to be hard for parents to do it too. But at the same time, if, like you said, if they want their kids to be responsible, they have to lead by example, and that's going to take a lot of hard work. I can tell you from my perspective, one thing I started doing, Keith, about 3 years ago, when I go to bed, my phone is not near me. It's in another room. It's in my office, and my wife has hers, so if it's an emergency, somebody can call her. But when I started doing, I was freaking out the first couple of nights, but after about a week, I was like, don't miss it. Now I look forward to making sure that's one of the first things I do, because it's not something I'm going to be worried about every time it dings, because I'm not going to be getting good sleep, because I'm more focused on what am I missing out on.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. And by the way, like, change is never easy, but it's actually not that hard. If the reason you could do it as a family is because you could support each other too.
Yeah.
Right. Like, hey,
Absolutely.
Dad, remember you're right. Right. Like, we're all going to screw up. Like, kids are going to screw up. Teens are going to screw up. Parents are going to screw up. We're not going to do it perfectly. But if we all have this contract together that we've collaboratively come up with, right?
Yep.
And by the way, like, as adults, we're jaded. All of our life experience is great. It's given us all this experience that we can share with the younger generation to help them. But at the same time, sometimes it pigeonholes us into a way of thinking also.
Yep.
And sometimes our teens can see things that we don't see. So even more important to be collaborative, because they might have a great idea that we're like, I didn't even think about that. That's a great idea, right? Or they might be like, look, I can't do that because of this. And they might have a really good reason why during that time period they need that's understandable. But if they have the conversation and you could collaboratively come up with a way of doing it, you can also hold each other accountable and remind each other, and together support each other. And so that way that change comes about, because once you get used to it, it's not that hard. We think it's hard because our brains are trained that way and our anxiety kicks in. But once we learn to manage that anxiety and we rewire our brain, right? That whole neuroplasticity thing, right? The way we view things, when we change that schism from which we view it and we see a different outcome, we can get used to that. And all of a sudden it just becomes the new habit. It takes a while, but when you do it collaboratively, you've got support.
Yeah, I just you bring that all full circle. It's not change that people are opposed to. It's the process of change is what they're opposed to, and I think that's what you're describing. So once you get over that first hump, it becomes easier. And I think the other part is go back to you were talking about that. Your parents slip up or whatever. It's all about the dialogue, and it's asking questions too, because if parents understand why a certain app or whatever may be important to the kids, like, okay, I can understand that, but I also want to make sure that it's safe. But that only happens if there's a conversation. So, creating this contract is all about dialogue, and it also builds respect between parents and their kids and kids and their parents. And that is a big part of what is missing too, because the communication, the verbal communication connection between parents and kids and vice versa, that gap is widened because of technology. And we all know this, but there has to be a conscious effort to close that gap, which means we got to step out of our comfort zone. Parents have to, kids have to, and you have to make compromises. But everybody's got to be willing to do that, and making kids understand there's nothing that you're missing. When Billy and Bobby are planning a party that's 3 months down the road, and we're talking about going to a family dinner, and it's like, well, we got to text about the planning, like, that certain things can take the back seat, and it's all about dialogue and communication. I always talk, everything always comes back for me. It's all about communication, regardless of what it is. And also, from an education standpoint, you were talking earlier about putting more and more responsibility on teachers. That's not going to help, because now they can't do their job, because now they got to be monitoring whether somebody has a phone. And I wanted to mention this earlier. We're talking about the distraction for kids too. What's one of the first things you happen whenever an incident happens on social media? Everybody pulls their phone out, starts recording. So it's like everybody's trying to be a videographer and a photographer, when in fact now we're dehumanizing whatever is happening, because we want to be a part of catching it and getting credit for it. So I'm posting, hey, I saw this, and they're trying to validate themselves based on that. So there's so many different things that tie into why social media is becoming such a distraction for humanity as a whole.
Yeah, and by the way, the cyberbullying, right? Like what you just said. Think about this. When we were kids, right? If I was walking through the cafeteria and I don't know, I slipped with my food and I spilt my spaghetti meatballs all over me, right? People laughed. I got up. I wiped myself off. I went to class. Like, it's it. It's over. Now, you fall. It's on video. Before you even get out of the cafeteria, your sister, your brother's texting you, are you okay? I heard you fell. How'd you hear? Oh, it's on social media. Then you get home and it's still following you, and it's there. It never goes away. Like, that one incident is now with you constantly, So instead of like, hey, it happened, it's forgotten. It's not forgotten. You're constantly reminded about it. And that alone, right? The emotional, so even though, the person might not be bullying you directly, the person that took that and posted it and shared it, now other people shared it, like, that is cyberbullying. It's just indirectly being done. But how do you think that person feels that, oh my God, I slipped and I got food on me, and now it's all over social media? Like, it's horrible. They got to go home and live with that. It's like people are being like, what happened, before they even got to tell them what happened. Like, they know before they know they had a chance to tell them. Like, it's just, that's a prime example of the power of, look, we've talked about a lot of negative. Listen, it's great for connection. It's great to share information. There's some girls that I know that I've worked with on you work in the same non-for-profit, right? With Digital for Good, right? Like, the girl I work with developed a mental health app that offers advice for youth, about health benefits, mostly women, right? About like dealing with women issues, right? But like really good infographics and healthy information from other teens about how they deal with these things. Like, that's the great part of social media, right? The positive, that stuff's great. But, and then look, sometimes it's just funny stuff, right? Like I love those videos of like the little kids that like
Yeah.
talk back to their parents or like cursing, right? Like they're funny. It makes you chuckle, it makes you laugh. There's no harm in it, right? So
Right.
there's plenty of positives to social media. It's just when we don't put boundaries on it and it just gets out of control, that's where it's bad. Like think about, look, I'm going to make this comment because a lot of parents will probably laugh right now when I say this. Like the husbands out there, how many of your wives are one of those stupid apps where these women are showing off clothing and you're getting the Amex bill with clothes that were bought online from this live show that your wife watches every night for like 45 minutes, mine included, by the way, right? I'm like, you are doom scrolling for an hour watching this lady trying outfits. Like, what is wrong with you? I get it. You need to buy it, but like you need to be on there for hours, right? So like we get sucked into the same thing as the kids do, but the difference is hopefully we are smart enough and strong enough to be able to break away, right? It's like watching like Star Wars, like the tractor beam, right? Like, like we have the power to like get away, but the kids don't. That big ship is just sucking in the little ship, right? And then they're engaged, right? So, I'm trying to make light of it, but it's true. As adults, we have the same issue. So if we can't teach them how to disengage, right? Because we can't disengage, how the hell do we expect them to? But like you said, we can't put it on the teachers. We need to educate parents. We need to have workshops, or the schools maybe need to hold something for the parents, even if it's mandatory. Like we do this twice a year. We're going to have an expert speak about this on ways to talk to your kids about social media, how to have a contract. And that's one of the things that with my other company, with my partner, Jody, we've been pushing. We're speaking to another district next week about bringing this initiative and doing professional development for teachers and bringing programming to the districts for the parents to help them teach this. Because if we can change the narrative, we can control what's going on in social media.
Yeah, but it also, and I think that's a great idea. And I think the biggest part is just like anything else is having the backing and support of the higher ups to make all these things happen. Because I love the fact that you guys are doing that, but you think about it such a small scale. If that spreads and it becomes a international, I wouldn't say national, because I'm sure this is happening everywhere. It'll make a big difference. But the longer we wait, the harder it's going to be to do that. Yeah,
every school should do a digital detox for a week. Every student, and you know what? Offer an incentive. So, they have plenty of money, right? We'll give everybody a $5. We'll give every single student a $5 Dunkin' Donuts gift card. If you hand in your phone here in the office, we'll lock it up and do a digital detox 1 week without your phone. And then we'll talk about how that feels. Let me tell you,
$5 ain't gonna do it, man.
No, but my point is, whatever it is, but if you mandated a digital detox, we're going to do this for a week. Everybody, teachers too, everybody in the school is going to do a digital detox, and we're not going to use our phones for an entire week, right? Those kids will come back. I guarantee you have kids that'll be like, I'm deleting Facebook and Instagram off my phone. Like, I don't need that. Like, I was so much more focused. I was so much more happy. That's not really a word. I was much happier. I wasn't emotionally charged. Like, I felt so good. My anxiety went down. Like, they don't realize that when they don't have it, how it will impact their mental health and their emotional health. And if they were able to do a detox, they would absolutely come back. There was a kid in the Midwest who did that. He gave up his smartphone. He got a flip phone. And he said for 30 days. And he said, it changed my life. Like,
I do remember that.
We have to, if we can do that and teach everybody that we actually have the power to control what these social media companies are trying to make us feel, right? They don't have us anymore. But it takes a lot of work, right? But I'm telling you, digital detox, 1 week, they will see just why it's such a good idea, and they will figure out ways to adjust their social media habits to benefit them, because they're going to see a complete difference in how they feel and how they focus.
Well, I'm going to give you a personal example of it. You obviously know what I've been kind of dealing with the last few months. Well, for about probably 3 weeks of that, I wasn't on my phone hardly at all. So my take on apps has changed. If you go look, I haven't posted on Instagram or Facebook in quite some time, and it was a detox. It was almost like a step back, But before that, it's like, okay, from a business perspective, I have to be consistent. I got to do X, Y, Z. But it's changed my approach. Like this young man that switched from his smartphone to a flip phone. It changes your perspective and it makes you realize, okay, what's important, and it makes you more intentional in what you do. And I think that that's kind of what you're referring to as well.
100%. So,
Yeah,
I know a lot of this is like, look, it's not so easy, and we're making it sound like, oh, just do this, just do it. But I'm just saying, when we try these things, you have to see how it makes you feel, right? Whether it's the digital detox, whether it's a parent contract, what a family contract, whatever you do. But anything you do is better than doing nothing.
Yep.
And if we start moving in a direction where, we recognize there's benefits to this, but there's also harmful effects, and we find a way to mitigate it and start to do things to make it a little better, that will change the whole dynamic.
Yeah, absolutely. No, 100%. Thought we figure before we close out, maybe a couple of tips on when we talked about a parent a teen contract. I think there's a couple things that both parents and teens can do too, is controlling I call you say feeds, monitoring what you see. I mean, I know for teens there's a lot of stuff that they do, but they come across some, I wouldn't necessarily say like really quote unquote bad, but more adult things that could be a bad influence on them. And parents monitoring, not spying, but monitoring what their kids watch, what they're viewing. And that's part of the contract too, I think. And you feel free to chime in too, is once you set that agreement, part of that is parents get a chance to kind of take your phone from time to time. Number one, they're probably paying for it, so it's their responsibility. But monitoring it just to make sure there's nothing on there that shouldn't be there.
I think it depends on the age, right? I think younger kids for sure.
Yeah, that's what I was referring to. The younger kids. Yeah, absolutely.
But I also
middle
think
school age.
No, 100%. I also think one of the things that could be is, right, it's all about you. We talk about, you always talk about communication, right? Like dinner conversation. All right. What did you look at today that made you feel good on your phone? What did you look at that made you feel that triggered you in a bad way? Right. Let's talk about it.
Love it.
Adults too, right?
Yeah.
Because again, what does that do? Oh, these things all made us feel good. Hey, they kind of have a similar vein. These things all made us feel bad. Maybe we need to not look at these things anymore together. Like as a family, we should realize these types of posts trigger us. Why are we even going there? Right? Like having it opens up the conversation. And if nothing else, what it might open, I saw this that triggered me. Why did it trigger you? Well, blah, 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 blah. Well, the parent could be like, well, can I share some perspective on that? Because, part of that is actually right. And part of it's actually, and that's an opportunity to teach critical thinking skills to your kids right there at the dinner table, a conversation, right? So part of that contract would be like once a week or once a day, we sit down for 15 minutes. Listen, every family is different, right? We all get it. Some parents work crazy, right? Like it's not like, I hate to say it, the days of sitting down to dinner as a family, it's very rare that you see that, right, in the household anymore, unfortunately, right, with extracurriculars. But there's got to be time. Maybe it's on the weekend. We're going to all go to breakfast on Sunday morning, whatever, and find a time. That's part of the contract. You're going to make a commitment to find a time to talk about what felt good this week that you saw, what triggered you, and talk about what triggered you. And there's opportunity to share, hear your kid's perspective on something that triggered an adult opportunity to teach your kids critical thinking skills. There's all benefit from that. So I think you're right.
Yeah, 100%. And it all goes back to not what parents and teens and kids are capable of. What are they willing to do to get to that level of responsibility? And I say phone responsibility. And you're absolutely right. Those days of everybody sitting down at 6 o'clock to have dinner, those days are long gone. I mean, I can't even think of the last time I was anywhere where a family sat down or heard of a family sitting down all at one time. But if it's important enough to you, you'll make the time. And I think that's what we're talking about, making the time to teach that. And I love the idea of, asking what they saw that was good and what wasn't. Again, I mean, developing a strong relationship with your kids is also talking about the tough things. And one of the best things to do is them being comfortable enough to share something that was bothersome to them or that they saw or witnessed on an app, and be willing to talk to you about it, because like you said, it's a critical thinking opportunity, but it's also a growing opportunity for the young person as well.
Yeah. And we can listen. We learn so much from our kids. Like I can honestly say it like you know my son, right? With his
Yeah.
ADHD and his like, the way his brain works. But sometimes he will just say something to me that just stops me in my tracks. And I'm like, wow. I'm like, he's right. Like I never thought of that, like
Yeah.
our kids say stuff like that to us all the time. I mean, listen, my daughter, my daughter's an attorney. She works for the federal government. I mean, with all the crazy stuff going on in the federal government right now, like she really grounds me. Like she'll share the reaction. She's like, this is what this really means. Cause she understands
Yeah.
it better than somebody who's a layperson, right? Because she's in it. And I'm like,
Right.
you know what? I did not know that. Like, I'm glad you told me that. Like, I had no idea that's what's really what this does or what this really means. Right. So like, there's so much we can learn from our children if we're willing to listen. And even, I mean, my kids are older, but even at a younger age, the same thing, right? Like, I remember punishing my daughter because she was being bad and I took away her phone and I took away her iPad. I took away all this crap. And she literally turns around to me and my wife. She's like, you could take away my laptop. You could take away my phone. You could take away my books, but you can't take away my imagination. Right. And I remember looking at my wife going, oh, we're screwed. Right. But the truth is, like, I always tell that story because I'm like, you know what? It's the truth, man. Like,
True. Yeah.
she's got that. You can do whatever you want with that imagination, right? You can lay in bed for hours and imagine, and like, what a beautiful way to think and be creative, right? And so even young, sometimes the things our kids say to us, we laugh, but they're profound, and we as adults get so jaded that we forget sometimes to think the way they think. Sometimes that innocence, that naivety, brings out things that are so obvious that we're not seeing because we're not so naive, or we're not, so we're not so innocent. So we figured out ways to, you know, I'm trying to think of the right word, ways of like distracting ourselves from that. And they drill it home and you're like, they're right. Right.
Yeah.
So that's why those conversations are important, because sometimes I think they can help heal us. Like when we're feeling bad about something, we see something that triggers us and they'll be like, why are you letting that? It's like, what is the point? They'll say something. You're like, what? You're right. Like, you're 100% right. Thank you. I feel better now.
Yeah.
That
Well, I
was
think well, you mentioned it early on in the episode, talking about we didn't grow up with, phones and social media and things of that nature. That is what parents have to remember. Their kids are not growing up in the same era that they were. So there has to be an understanding, and from their perspective, no, you don't have to totally change the way you parent, but you have to understand what world your kids are growing up in. And they're growing up in a world where they basically, by the time after they start walking, they're involved in electronics. If it's little iPad games that kids play on, they're introduced to it early, whereas you weren't. So you have to understand that. And that's why these conversations have to be had as well, and why parents need to listen to their kids too. And not the kids, they can remind them in a certain way that, hey, I understand that, but, this is a different world than what you grew up in. I can tell you, I was going to say earlier, I was in my late 30s when I got my first phone. And I'm thinking, think about how many years that is that in between what kids are going now. I'm in my 30s. So how much did I miss? And it was like, getting a Christmas gift. But because everything was trickled, drip, 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 that's how I learned it. But for them, it's just like from day one.
Yeah.
So I think that's something that has to be understood as well.
Yeah. Just from anxiety, like I remember 9/11, right? My daughter was, I think, 2 years old. And, we used to have like a nanny that helped out a little bit because we both work. And, we told her, when the newspaper comes, hide the newspaper. I didn't need my daughter seeing that the World Trade Center had 2 planes hit it and there's a terrorist out there that want to kill Americans, right? Like she was shielded from that. She didn't know what was going on, and until she was old enough to understand it, when she heard about it once and came to me and said, what is this? I was able to explain it to her, but she was able to process it. Right. Now, that same, fifth grade, she was 2 at the time, but I'm just saying she didn't know about it until 5th, 6th grade. Now that 5th grader, if they have that smartphone, you can't hide that from them. If something happens, they're going to know about it. And then they're going to get anxious and, oh my God, what if it, like, think about the anxiety. Imagine a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old, 11-year-old, finding out about a terrorist attack that happened in their state.
Yeah.
Right. that's going to freak them out. They don't have the emotional regulation to not understand like
and deal
just
with
how
that.
rare that is, and that it probably won't happen, right? Like,
Yeah.
that will trigger them, and now they have anxiety, and now they're like, that's just a tiny example about how having access to that information. And I know that's an extreme example.
Yeah, but it's a great example.
But
It's a
still,
great example.
it's an example,
Yeah.
and so all that information that they get access to, or a school shoot. I mean, my God, my friend's kid was at Parkland, was in the school during the Parkland shooting, and then was at FSU when they had the shooting there. So
Oh,
lived through 2 school shootings. Could you imagine my friend's kid, the trauma that this kid has now? Like any public space, and he's always like this, looking at like,
I'm sure.
right? So imagine all those kids on their phones that didn't live through it but heard about it and go to school. It could happen to me, right? So it's just, I hate to bring up negative, traumatic things like that.
It's
But
important though.
if they didn't, we wouldn't have known about those things growing up.
Yeah.
They know about it as soon as they get a phone because it's all over the place. And things like that cause anxiety.
Yeah. No, you're 100% right. And I know we don't really want to talk about it, but I think it's important too, because, we don't want to sugarcoat any of these topics, because that's why we're talking about them, because there are pros and there are cons to them, and they got to see both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
I think it's important to do that. So, this is, like I said, this is something that's going to be ongoing, I'm sure, Keith, and it'd be interesting to see what happens in New York with this new policy that's been implemented. And definitely love, maybe we can follow back up with about what after the first semester, if not before, see how the feedback has been. I'm
going to keep you updated because I'm doing a lot of work in the community on this right now with Jody, and we're speaking at a lot of schools, to a lot of PTAs, to a lot of superintendents about this and how to build these contracts, and how the teachers can talk to the kids, and how they can do an assembly to explain to the kids why this is good and that we're not punishing you, we're supporting you, and if it's done the right way, I think this could be a really good initiative. It's just, it has to be rolled out properly, and unfortunately, you know how it is, right? Government loves to shove it in your face. There's a new, well, no.
And deal with it.
Just listen, the smartest way to get people to come along is to implement small changes at a time, because they get used to the one change. And then at the end of the day, you're going to get what you want.
Yeah.
But if you really want to get what you want, you got to start small. If you just try
to, how you go about it.
You're not going to get people to buy in. Right? And even if you are manipulating them a little bit, they're not going to feel manipulated if you're doing it little by little. But the minute you try to tell them you're doing this, they're going to feel manipulated. They're going to push back.
Yeah. So, it is the pushback you got to worry about.
Yeah. It's got to be slow and steady. But I think it's a good idea. I think they just need to roll it out in a way, and they need to get the buy-in from the whole community, because if everybody can buy into it, there's a huge benefit. And I'll keep you posted. I'll let you know how it goes.
Awesome. Thank you, brother. It's always a pleasure talking with you. Hey, listen, as much as I love talking to you, I'd much rather have some guests on here to talk to. And we have a couple ways that we can get people on here. You have a form on your website, shiftyourpower.com, and I have one on my website, CoachTsCorner.com. So if you have a preteen or teen, or if you're a teen or preteen watching and would like to be a guest on the show, just go to the website, fill out a form, or you can shoot us an email, and whichever way works best for you. We'd love to have you on. There's so much that we want to talk about, but we want to hear from the people that it's affecting the most, and that's the next generation of leaders.
Absolutely.
And with that, I am Coach T in North Carolina, and really appreciate you guys tuning in and listening to us talk about things that are important to us. And Keith, you want to give us any words of encouragement or any advice or some good feel words before we head out?
Well, I always can come up with some quote, but I think on this topic, really, it's just like, just remember, like, as a parent, what your kids are seeing, it's curated specifically for them to see it that way. And just talk to them, talk to your kids, educate your kids, and, don't make the phone the enemy. Just find a way to make the phone a device that can serve them, and teach them the way it doesn't serve them. And if you can help them understand the line between when it's good and when it's bad, and do that through conversation instead of, don't do this, don't do that. Anything with your kids, right? It's like anything. Get them to buy in. They're gonna support it. Tell them they have to do it. You lost them.
Yeah.
Every time.
And this is a great question to ask them too, is ask them, are you using your phone or is your phone using you?
Yeah.
That'd be a good way to do it.
There you go. 100%.
Right?
100%.
Yeah.
Well, it's Coach Keith. Always good to be here with you, Coach T. And like I said, hopefully we get some teams that want to hop on here. But if not, we will continue to try to come here with some really good topics and really honest conversation. And we appreciate your comments and certainly appreciate any feedback and any comments you can post on the podcast. You know, the more stars we get, the more we go up in the rankings, and the more we go up in the rankings, the more people get access to what we're really trying to put out there. And I do believe what we have to say and what we're doing is good for the world. So help us spread the word.
Yeah. We don't need any more stars. We are stars, man. Me and you.
Yeah, but unfortunately the algorithm doesn't know that.
Great comeback, dude. Hey, listen, always a pleasure to talk to you, my friend, and we'll do it again real soon.
Sounds good. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
See ya.
If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on TeenSpeak, be sure to connect with Keith at shiftyyourpower.com or Antoine at CoachT@CoachT'sCorner.com.